The day Iceland's women went on strike. 47 years ago, the women of Iceland went on strike. They refused to work, cook, and look after children for a day. It was a moment that changed the way women were seen in the country and helped put Iceland at the forefront of the fight for equality. When Ronald Reagan became the U.S. president, one small boy in Iceland was outraged. "He can't be a president, he's a man," he exclaimed to his mother when he saw the news on the television. It was November 1980, and Vigdis Finnbogadóttir, a divorced single mother, had won Iceland's presidency that summer. The boy didn't know it, but Vigdis, all Icelanders go by their first name, was Europe's first female president and the first woman in the world to be democratically elected as a head of state. Many more Icelandic children may well have grown up assuming that being president was a woman's job, as Vigdis went on to hold the position for 16 years that set Iceland on a course to become known as the world's most feminist country. But Vigdis insists she would never have been president had it not been for the events of one sunny day, 24 October 1975, when 90% of women in the country decided to demonstrate their importance by going on strike. Instead of going to the office, doing housework or childcare, they took to the streets in the thousands to rally for equal rights with men. It is known in Iceland as the Women's Day Off. What happened that day was the first step for women's emancipation in Iceland, she says. It completely paralyzed the country and opened the eyes of many men. Banks, factories, and some shops had to close, as did schools and nurseries, leaving many fathers with no choice but to take their children to work. We heard children playing in the background while the newsreaders read the news on the radio. It was a great thing to listen to, knowing that the men had to take care of everything, said Vigdis. As radio presenters called households in remote areas of the country to gauge how many rural women were taking the day off, the phone was often answered by husbands who had stayed at home to look after the children. Vigdis, her mother, and 3-year-old daughter were present in the sea of 25,000 women who gathered in Iceland's capital that day to sing, listen to speeches, and talk about what could be done. It was a huge turnout for an island of just 220,000 inhabitants. There was a tremendous power in it all, and a great feeling of solidarity and strength among all those women standing on the square in the sunshine, Vigdis says. Women in Iceland got the right to vote 100 years ago, in 1915, behind only New Zealand and Finland, but over the next 60 years, only 9 women took seats in Parliament. In 1975, there were just 3 sitting female MPs, or just 5% of the Parliament, compared with between 16% and 23% in the other Nordic countries, and this was a major source of frustration. The idea of a strike was first proposed by the Red Stockings, a radical women's movement founded in 1970, but to some Icelandic women it felt too confrontational. But when the strike was renamed Women's Day Off, it secured near universal support, including solid backing from the unions. But how did men feel about it? I think at first they thought it was something funny, but I can't remember any of them being angry, said Vigdis. Men realized if they became opponents to this or refused to allow women the day off, they would have lost their popularity. There were 1 or 2 reports of men not behaving as Vigdis describes. The husband of one of the main speakers was reportedly asked by a coworker, "Why do you let your woman howl like that in public places? I would never let my woman do such things." The husband shot back, "She is not the sort of woman who would ever marry a man like you." Even the co-chief editor of a conservative newspaper had no objection to the idea. "I do not think that I have ever supported a strike, but I did not see this action as a strike," he says. "It was a demand for equal rights. It was a positive event. No women worked at the paper that day. As he remembers it, none of them lost pay, and they returned at midnight to help get the newspaper finished. It was shorter than usual, though, 16 pages instead of 24. The Women's Day Off is generally regarded in Iceland as a world-changing moment. Things went back to normal the next day, but with the knowledge that women were, as well as men, the pillars of society, Vigdis says. So many companies and institutions came to a halt, and it showed the force and necessity of women. It completely changed the way of thinking. 5 years later, Vigdis beat 3 male candidates to the presidency. She became so popular that she was re-elected unopposed in 2 of the 3 next elections. We say in Iceland, the steppes so quickly fill up with snow, meaning there is a tendency to consign things or forget them to history, says Vigdis. But we still talk about that day. It was marvelous.